Welcome back to CON. I'm your host, Fake Fapper. Today's top story. Democrats are pushing a radical new spending bill to tackle the slow and completely avoidable collapse of American empire. But questions remain about how they'll be able to get it done. Joining me now to discuss, from Brooklyn obviously, it's YouTuber Carlos Meza. Actually, it's pronounced Let's get down to business, shall we? Okay. You're a supporter of the new Democratic spending bill, are you not? Not sure why you're calling it a spending bill, Fake, but yeah, I am. It's been a long time since the government's made a big investment in the working class, and I think this bill takes some important steps towards upgrading our infrastructure, fighting climate change, and repairing our country's crumbling social safety net. Could I get the champagne? Thank you so much. If anything, this bill doesn't go far enough, but at least it gets us moving in the right direction. Yeah, that all sounds nice, moneybags. There's just one little problem. Here we go. One teeny little problem with your big spending plan every time. Maybe you haven't been checking the numbers lately, but we're broke, buddy. There it is. Up to our asses in debt. Oh, thank you so much. So if you're done with your little campaign speech, how about you answer the only question that actually matters? How are you gonna pay for it? Right after this commercial break. We're back in 3, Mr. Fapper. Thank you. One of the most subtle ways that news outlets influence their viewers is through something called framing, choosing the angle or lens through which a major news story gets covered. So if you were covering the recent Build Back Better plan, for example, you could choose from a bunch of different frames. You could use a policy effectiveness frame, asking if the bill goes far enough to fix the problems it claims to address. Or you could use a broken government frame, focusing on how the filibuster has made it basically impossible to pass legislation through Congress. Or you could use a deficit frame, asking,
who's going to pay for it and how?
Question, of course, is how to pay for it.
I hear it all the time. How do we pay for it?
By the time Build Back Better died in Congress last year, most Americans didn't even know what was in it. They didn't know that it included things like universal childcare, free community college, tax credits for solar panels, funding for public housing, upgrades to our drinking water systems. According to a CBS poll, 60% of Americans could not name a single provision in the bill. What they did know about the bill is how much it cost. Nearly 60% of respondents said they'd heard about the bill's price tag despite not knowing what was in it. That disconnect is not a reflection of the average American's deep interest in budgetary policy. It's a reflection of the media's framing, which is focused relentlessly on the bill's cost.
Major sticking points remain, including how much it will cost and how it will be paid for.
How are you gonna pay for it? I might wanna move into a Barbie dream house, but if I don't have any money, I ain't moving.
Studies show that when media elites focus on the deficit frame, public anxiety about the deficit starts to spike in response. And that anxiety tends to overwhelm other considerations about the bill. If you ask them directly, most Americans really supported the provisions of the Build Back Better bill. But the media's deficit frame changes that. Even when a bill is popular with the public, news coverage that focuses on costs ends up reducing support for the bill across the board. And if you are an ugly, bitter leftist who watches way too much cable news, this pattern probably feels familiar to you. The people want a Green New Deal.
Who's going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that?
The people want Medicare for all.
How will you pay for it?
People want affordable education.
Of course, the inevitable question, who's going to pay for it?
It's like clockwork. Anytime there's a discussion about spending money on the working class, how will you pay for it is the first and sometimes only question that gets asked.
Man, do you want to spend a lot of my tax money on these proposals that you and Bernie and others have? How do you pay? How do you sell it?
So this time, I came prepared. Back from commercial in 3, 2... Welcome back, low information boomers and people waiting for their flights to board. We're discussing the new Democratic spending bill, which is expected to have a price tag of over $1 trillion. So the question on everybody's mind is, how are you gonna pay for it? I'm actually glad you asked that, Fake. I know $1 trillion sounds like a lot of money, but it's important to remember that that cost is over 10 years. And actually, the bill mostly pays for itself by closing tax loopholes for multimillionaires and giant corporations. That's not some left-wing pipe dream, that's according to the Congressional Budget Office, which estimates the real cost of the bill to be around $350 billion over the next decade. Who gave the guest graphics? For comparison, that's less than half of what we spent on military spending last year alone. Yeah, it's a nice story, but you're dodging the question. How are you gonna pay for it? What do you mean? I just told you. We're gonna pay for it by closing tax loopholes on the rich and giant corporations. That CBO reports about how the bill basically pays for itself. I'm sorry, what are you opening right now? It's the new defense budget. We got gold knives! Wait, seriously? Seriously? Answer the question. Fine. Let me take a different approach. Take closing tax loopholes out of it. Oh, thank God. Okay, so a bunch of money in the bill goes to things like childcare and reducing child poverty, right? No idea. Haven't read the bill. Okay, well it does. And that money is not being wasted, it's an investment. Kids who have more resources end up doing better in school, getting better jobs, and contributing more money to the economy. In fact, studies show that every dollar we spent on child welfare produces $7 to $12 in economic returns. What the fuck is that? It's a chart for the point I was just making. We don't do that here. This is CON, baby. We run on vibes and vibes alone. There's no time for evidence-based analysis. We've got 45 seconds before the next commercial break. Keep it snappy. Okay, fine. I'll try a different approach, okay? Even if the bill's expensive, it's less expensive than doing nothing. Failing to prepare for climate change means more air pollution, more dependence on foreign oil, and more extreme weather events. Those problems will cost us a lot more money in the long term than just dealing with it now. Don't spit. And that's not just true of this bill either. Socialized medicine, public education, free housing for the homeless, all of this stuff is less expensive than having to deal with the problem later down the road. Yeah, but you're still talking long term, and I didn't ask you about long term. How are you gonna pay for it now? This is a deranged way of talking about government spending. You calculate the cost of the bill over 10 years, but you won't consider its long-term economic benefits? No government program could survive an analysis like this. What are you opening now? It's a supplemental defense budget. We got bazookas! We'll be right back. Back in 5. Hey, I'm gonna need some backup. Yeah, the nerd brought charts. Okay, thank you. There's a reason Democrats are always being asked how they'll pay for things. It's called issue ownership, a phenomenon by which the party that talks the most about a topic gets to control the debate around it. Republicans have spent decades complaining about government spending and painting themselves as a party of fiscal discipline.
When we say we're going to cut spending, read my lips. We're going to cut spending.
All I want to do is bring spending under control. That's what most of us campaigned on.
Come on, we're broke. We've got to make tough decisions.
It's part of their party identity, part of their brand. So when it comes time for the media to cover a Democratic policy idea, the deficit frame is already waiting for them.
Republicans have voiced strong opposition to the cost and scope of the president's $2 trillion bill.
Jesus Christ, what is this B-roll? One of the loudest voices on CNN during the Build Back Better debate wasn't a climate expert or a poverty expert, it was John Kasich.
Let's take it to the better minds. Former Republican Ohio Governor John Kasich, former Republican strategist Stuart Stevens.
This guy doesn't know shit about the bill, nor does he hold any political power, but he used to complain about spending a lot. And Republicans are complaining about spending now, so put him on TV, I guess.
Forget this Build Back Better, whatever it is. Break it up. Don't shove it all through. Figure out how you're going to pay for it. And then also end the groupthink inside the White House.
It's like having a friend who's constantly making comments about your weight. Eventually, you'll start worrying about what you eat in front of them, even if they're the ones ordering extra fries. Actually, I think I'm gonna get the lobster. I know, I'm so bad. Thank you so much. The problem, of course, is that this is all a giant con. Republicans don't actually give a shit about the debt, and they never have. Look at this chart of the past 50 years. Over and over again, it's Republicans who have driven up the debt, not Democrats. Tax cuts for the rich, pointless wars, subsidies for oil and gas companies, all of this has resulted in irregular deficit increases under Republicans, while Democrats trip over themselves to promise that every bill will be paid for.
Now we're back in deficit of the reckless economic policies of the Bush year. We must dig our way out again.
This isn't some secret conspiracy I'm exposing here either. Republicans openly admit that they don't actually mean what they say about spending. It's a great talking point when you have an administration that's Democrat-led. It's a little different now that Republicans have both houses and the administration. It was standard practice not to pay for things when Bush was president. Reagan proved deficits don't matter.
He could be walking down the street, I wouldn't know a thing.
I think the best example of this, though, comes from Mick Mulvaney, the head of Trump's Office of Budget Management. During the Obama years, Mulvaney was one of the loudest Republican voices against government spending.
If you don't have money, the first thing you do is stop spending more money.
But once Republicans were in power, Mulvaney oversaw one of the largest deficit expansions in history thanks to Trump's tax cut.
Back when you were in Congress, you were a deficit hawk. What happened, sir?
What happened was obvious. My party is very interested in deficits when there's a Democrat in the White House. The worst thing in the whole world was deficits when Barack Obama was the president. Then Donald Trump became president, and we're a lot less interested as a party.
You belong to a party that has greenlit a historic expansion of deficits and debt. And it's just a plain fact.
Trump's policies have been profoundly pro-growth.
Yeah.
The tax cut...
Also profoundly pro-deficit.
Thing is, concern trolling about the debt isn't just a Republican scam. Conservative Democrats do it too. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema both opposed the Build Back Better plan because they claimed it cost too much money. And because their votes were necessary, news outlets ran segment after segment repeating their deficit frame talking points.
Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema expressing concerns about the plan's price tag.
Steadfastly opposing the mega price tag.
That $3.5 trillion price tag is simply too high.
But Manchin and Sinema do not actually give a shit about the debt. Both of them have voted 100% of the time to approve the Pentagon's defense budget, which amounts to trillions of dollars of spending. Manchin voted to spend billions funding Trump's border wall.
I wanted Mexico to pay for the wall, but they're not.
And Sinema voted to spend billions more making Trump's tax cuts permanent.
Sinema voted yes, despite her warning a year ago about the government borrowing more and more money to pay for the tax cuts.
They're not deficit hawks, they're just Republicans. And when they finally agreed to support a watered-down version of the bill this year, it wasn't because it cost less, it was because they'd won giant concessions to fossil fuel companies and private equity firms, who donate tons of money to their campaigns.
She gets a lot of campaign contributions from business and financial elites, and no doubt that a lot of them are in her ear about this.
Over and over again, the deficit frame turns out to be a smokescreen that politicians use to hide the real reasons behind their votes. But why do journalists keep falling for it?
And we're back in 10.
Can't eat this.
9,
I'm allergic.
8, 7.
Guess we'll find out.
4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, folks. Now, I know things got a little heated during the last segment, and I don't want this to devolve into a partisan dogfight, so I think it's time we bring in a neutral expert to make sense of all this money talk. Joining us now from the Foundation for Reasonable and Moderate Economists, please welcome back to the show, Charles. Oh, fuck me. Oh, I will. Thanks for having me back, Fake. It's great to see you again. You too, King. Champagne? Thank you. Can I just say, the editing on this video so far is really bad. Trust me, I know. Cheers. Cheers. No, way too late on the sound cue on that one, guys. I thought it was fine, Jananda. Now, Charles, talk us through your nonpartisan concerns about the Democratic bling-bling big money spending bill. Yeah, happily, Fake. I've crunched the numbers, and the bottom line is we can't be spending more money than we're taking in. Every household in America knows that if you spend more money than you take in, you go into debt. And debt is not good. I mean, just look at this number. Number big. And if we spend more money, big number go up, and big number, bad. It's basic economics. Seems airtight to me. Carlos, your rebuttal? Okay, I don't know why everyone uses this household budget metaphor. The government is not like a household budget for a very obvious reason. It controls the amount of currency in the system. They can print more money if they need to. Print more money? Are you out of your mind? How did that only hit me? Printing money is how you get a little thing called inflation, my guy. Inflation. Every dollar you print lowers the value of every other dollar. You start handing out government checks and pretty soon we're gonna end up like Venezuela. Oh, he said Venezuela. Everybody drink. I mean, the government already handed out a few stimulus checks and look at what's happened to the price of milk. Yeah, have you seen the price of milk lately? Hold on, do you guys seriously think we're experiencing inflation because the government sent out a few stimulus checks? Yeah, basically. We're experiencing inflation because there's a war in Ukraine, and the price of oil is going up, which is making the price of everything go up. If anything, inflation is a reason to support the bill because it makes us less dependent on foreign oil. Yeah, but what about the milk? The price of milk isn't going up because of inflation. It's going up because giant companies like Kroger's and Albertsons are using inflation as an excuse to price gouge their customers. I mean, look at this chart. If inflation were to blame, these companies would not be posting record profits right now. But they are. Oh, blame corporations. It's always corporations. Don't take it from me, take it from them. A little bit of inflation is always good in our business. We will take as much pricing as we think the consumer can absorb. Most, if not all, of our net sales growth will be driven by price. Again with the graphics. Jananda, stop giving clip art to the communist. And stop fucking with the chyrons. Also, printing more money does not cause inflation. What? A little complicated to explain, but the value of a dollar is not just based on how many dollars there are, it's also based on the total economic power that those dollars represent, right? So as long as we're investing those new dollars into things that make America more productive. You mean like more weapons? No, not like more weapons. Jesus, you vultures ever met a bomb you didn't want to sit and spin on? Hey. No, truly never. As long as we're investing that new money in things like upgrading our energy grid, improving our infrastructure, and helping people get a decent education so they can work better jobs, the relative value of the dollar won't change over time. Think of it this way, which country's money is worth more? A country that printed $10 and has a shit economy to show for it? Or a country that printed $10,000 and used that money to build factories, develop renewable energy, and upgrade their workforce? As long as we invest it wisely, the money we print ends up creating the economic power that gives that new money its value. Does that make sense? What the fuck is he talking about? I have no idea. Hey, Mesa, how about you spare us for wild economic theories, buddy? You're a YouTuber who can barely afford your own rent. This guy's an expert, okay? An impartial purveyor of knowledge and information. I'm wearing a button down. We're both wearing button downs. So please explain why anyone should listen to someone like you over an expert like him. He's gonna cut me off, isn't he? Right after this break. What's with the earrings? I think he's trying to buy a personality. How's he gonna pay for that? Think tanks. Can't live with them.
Death to all of them.
How will you pay for it? Maybe a Republican scam, but I think the reason so many journalists buy into it is because at first glance, it feels nonpartisan. After all, it's not just politicians fear-mongering about the debt. You've got all these nonprofit groups like the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and the Bipartisan Policy Center, all arguing that we need to cut spending to avoid economic disaster.
Nobody is willing to make hard policy choices. They would rather give things away and kind of level with American people about what we need to do to budget responsibly.
But isn't it weird that these nonpartisan groups sound exactly like Republicans? I mean, deficits aren't just a spending problem, they're also a revenue problem. America has some of the lowest rates of corporate tax revenues in the industrialized world. And our tax code is unbelievably easy on the super rich. If these think tanks were really worried about the debt, they could just as easily be arguing for raising taxes on the rich to pay for the things we need. So why is it that all these nonprofit groups are so fixated on cutting programs for the working class? Enter Pete Peterson, one of the stupidest names and most powerful billionaires in American politics. Peterson was a former CEO at Lehman Brothers and the Secretary of Commerce under Richard Nixon, but he made his fortune as a co-founder of the Blackstone Group, one of the most notorious private equity firms in the country. Now, if you don't know what private equity is, congratulations, you are probably going to heaven. Just kidding. None of us are going to heaven. God has abandoned us. The wicked have inherited the earth, and the good are too afraid to deliver the justice they rightly deserve. This is all there is, all there ever will be, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. Is someone gonna top me off or what? Private equity firms are essentially vultures. They buy up struggling companies promising to fix their debt, then they cut services and programs to save money, and then use that money to pay themselves, typically resulting in the company collapsing. It's an extremely evil and lucrative scam, one that's earned the head of Blackstone the title of modern-day robber baron. Peterson, though, wasn't satisfied with robbing private companies. His real goal was to rob the federal government, cutting social programs for the working class in order to pay for bigger and bigger tax cuts for the rich. But to do that, he first had to convince people that America had a spending problem. So in 2008, Peterson launched the Pete Peterson Foundation, dedicating nearly $500 million of his own dollars to producing propaganda about the national debt.
Well, we're going to have to persuade the American people that they're on a very destructive and unsustainable path, and they've got to make some tough decisions. We've got to give up certain programs. We've got to cut certain programs back.
Now, normally in my videos, this would be the part where I start playing like ominous music and telling you how destructive Peterson's propaganda was, but honestly, the first few years of this were an absolute clusterfuck. In 2009, he funded a series of nationwide town halls.
Imagine sitting at a table with 10 or 12 people from different backgrounds, talking about an issue that's important to you. This is the work of America Speaks.
These town halls were essentially brainwashing operations, designed to trick people into thinking that cutting government programs was really their idea.
Here's something else we're going to need to get in there because it's coming up. Where would the money come from?
The entire event was absolutely designed to create a panic about the deficits among the participants. Slickly produced videos talking about the dire straits of the budget. Multiple charts and graphs without precise numbers or percentages. Overall, there's about 15 minutes of discussion of the current economic problems and 5 hours on the deficit. Unfortunately for Peterson, though, people were not buying it. Despite all the biases, participants opposed cuts in Social Security benefits. Most favored cutting defense spending and enacting progressive tax measures. No matter how many times the facilitators tried to steer us towards cutting Social Security and Medicare, the people who took part in this national town hall weren't buying it. You know what most of them wanted to do? Soak the rich and cut defense spending. This would become a pattern. In 2011, the Peterson Foundation launched a short film competition, offering $500 to whoever could make the best video about the need to cut spending. Only problem was, the winner of that contest was not decided by Peterson, it was decided by the public. And the public does not agree with Peterson's bullshit. So that $500 reward ended up going to an amateur rap video about why we should be taxing the rich instead.
Social Security payments are far from erratic. It's broke and failing. Don't believe that static.
This crisis is a fiction. There would be no debate if we all pitched in at the same tax rate.
Better spit that shit, Grandma! But my favorite PR stunt came in 2012, when Peterson realized he had to step his propagussy up and assembled some of the most powerful CEOs and defense contractors in the country to launch something called the Fix the Debt campaign.
We have over 100 CEOs, including General Electric and Walmart and all the big companies that are going to get on board.
You know, are they really going to stand up for a change and really say something? Because every time I hear about this, then they kind of shirk back and you never really hear from them.
They are going to stand up this time.
These CEOs were running the same scam that Peterson was. Most of them had spent years paying negative tax rates and fighting for tax loopholes that would explode the debt by over $1 trillion. But they wanted to create the illusion that the average American really wanted to cut government spending. And to do that, they organized a flash mob in DC that I think we should just watch together. So it starts off with two gangs. On one side, you have the red team, which I guess represents Peterson's side. And you have the blue team, which does not want to cut spending, and I guess represents us. They meet in the middle, and it looks like we're about to have the world's nerdiest gang fight. But then, oh. Oh no, they're dancing. Some of them don't know the steps. It appears some of them look confused. And oh, they were on the same team the whole time.
I'm getting horny.
I'm getting horny.
So you're probably thinking, that is the saddest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. But it gets even sadder, because it turns out that those flash mobbers were actually just local dancers who'd been paid $65 to be there. And when asked if they actually supported cutting government programs like Medicare and Social Security, they did not. I don't think that's part of the solution to fix the debt. It's just that part that I don't agree with. I see what my mom and dad get on Social Security. What she gets from Social Security is a pittance. It would barely be enough for her and my dad to survive on. The only reason I could even find video of the flash mob is because it was posted on YouTube by a DC dance company. And even they are like, only posting because it happens right in front of the office that I work at. I don't care about politics. What's he laughing at over there? Is he looking at his insurance or something? Hey!
Grown people should never laugh.
Turns out the average American wasn't dumb enough to fall for Peterson's AstroTurf campaign. But your average corporate media newsroom? They're a much easier target.
Congress is hearing from all sides on the fiscal cliff. A coalition of business and economic leaders in the Fix the Debt campaign.
Fix the Debt campaign. Bipartisan Fix the Debt campaign.
They've got this big campaign that they're pushing, something like $35 million ads. You know, they're really pushing this.
Peterson quickly realized that while he couldn't influence Americans directly, he could influence the people they trusted on TV. And one way he did that was by funding an army of nonpartisan think tanks. Over the past few years, Peterson has given millions of dollars to groups like CRFB and the Bipartisan Policy Center, who then go on to repeat Peterson's talking points in press releases and interviews.
This is a lot of money. Should they be concerned?
Oh, absolutely. This is a fiscal free-for-all.
These groups help keep the deficit frame in every news cycle, getting cited over and over again by journalists looking for impartial commentary. And they've had an especially big impact on election coverage, thanks to debate moderators who quote them at any mention of government spending.
The Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget.
According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget.
Independent bipartisan organization, the Committee for a Responsible...
The Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget says your initiatives would cost up to $28 trillion. How is this fiscally responsible?
Peterson doesn't just rely on think tanks, though. He often shapes the media more directly. In 2008, his foundation created IOUSA, a fear-mongering documentary about the need to cut programs like Medicare and Social Security.
We suffer from a fiscal cancer.
Now you're probably thinking, what news outlet would air such an obvious propaganda film? CNN. CNN would, airing a 2-hour segment featuring clips of the documentary and inviting Peterson himself to take part in an interview about the film. Unfortunately, I could not find clips of that interview because the archives I use do not go back that far. But don't worry, because in 2011, they did it again, airing another 2-hour segment on a second Pete Peterson documentary.
How do we convince a politician to make our deficit reduction a priority? Do we have to convince the voters first? Pete Peterson, what's really behind this is awareness. You want to go straight to the people and tell them we've got to get our policymakers to start thinking about it.
What? It's the marketplace of ideas. In 2011, Peterson founded the Fiscal Times, a news outlet whose sole purpose was to pass off Peterson's talking points as if it were serious journalism. And again, you're probably thinking, that's a little obvious, isn't it? Who would fall for such an obvious propaganda? The Washington Post. The Washington Post fell for it, announcing a partnership with the Fiscal Times and publishing their content directly without disclosing Peterson's political agenda. It was an honest mistake. And it didn't stop there. The Peterson Foundation has given huge chunks of money to outlets like ProPublica, the Columbia Journalism Review, and PBS.
Major support for World Focus has been provided by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, dedicated to promoting fiscal responsibility.
And he's given millions more to traditionally left-wing think tanks like CAP, the Urban Institute, and Brookings, who then used that money to repeat Peterson's talking points.
Center for American Progress has put forward proposals to reform the beneficiary structure of Social Security. Some of our progressive allies aren't as excited about that as we are.
As one consultant told the New York Times, everyone I know in the budget community is trying to get Peterson money. Okay, the next round is on you. But maybe the clearest examples of Peterson's influence on the media are his fiscal summits.
President Bill Clinton, Congressman Paul Ryan, and others will all come together in Washington tomorrow for the Peterson Foundation's 2011 Fiscal Summit.
Every year, the Peterson Foundation puts on a fiscal summit in D.C., inviting some of the country's most prominent journalists and politicians to come talk about the dangers of government spending.
Mr. Peterson, I have to ask you, you've been talking about the debt crisis for years. Now it seems everyone is talking about it. The issue is in vogue. What do you make of this debate that's going on right now in Washington?
Well, that's a nice lead-in question. That's why we're having the summit.
These summits are another cheap PR stunt, the kind of thing you'd expect a serious journalist to avoid like the plague. But year after year, the most influential media personalities in the country show up to kiss the ring. Brokaw, Schieffer, Stephanopoulos. Think of a big-name journalist, and they have probably attended this thing. Even our beloved Wonk could not resist the call of a billionaire with a press pass, hosting a panel in which a New York Times columnist blamed the debt on the average American's greediness.
Insofar as anybody's responsible for the debt, is it the public? Is it Washington?
People want more government than they're willing to pay for. So we're more aware of our individual needs, and I think thus have less of a moral horror at pushing debt. And I think that's essentially the cultural foundation of the problem.
A review of the proceedings of the fiscal summits makes agonizingly clear that most of the journalists who conducted interviews or moderated panel discussions both reflected and amplified the Peterson worldview, entirely unselfconsciously, it would seem.
Do you think democracy is part of the problem? Then in democracy, people are always going to vote for more things. They're never going to vote to take them away. I mean, is democracy going to be what sends us over the cliff?
Jesus, are we still on commercial break? Babe, it's CON. We are the commercial break. I know this part of the video is running long, but it's hard to overstate how effective Peterson has been in influencing media elites. You have CNN hosts recommending Peterson Foundation books on national TV.
The book has some very good ideas for reining in spending.
You have MSNBC hosts reading Peterson tweets directly to their audience.
Talk to Pete Peterson, talk to anybody. They will tell you Medicare is going to bankrupt us.
You have journalists like Leslie fucking Stahl sitting on the board of the Peterson Foundation and attending lavish dinners with the person they're supposed to be reporting on.
Thank you very much, Pete. We're all friends, so I think I can call you Pete.
For over a decade, Peterson and his billionaire buddies have been convincing journalists that there's just no money left in the bank, that Americans are just too greedy, and that the only responsible thing to do is to make deep cuts to America's social programs. And for over a decade, they have not meant a goddamn word of it. The second Trump got elected, the same CEOs and defense contractors who had spent years leading the Fix the Debt campaign suddenly changed their tune, loudly cheering Trump's $1 trillion tax cut for the rich. It's about capitalism, one said. Tax cuts will be good for growth and therefore will be good for our clients and good for our firm. In an interview with Bloomberg, the co-chair of the Fix the Debt campaign said he didn't actually care if Trump's tax cuts added a few $1 trillion in new debt. Concern, in my opinion, should be focused on entitlement reform. When another Fix the Debt member asked his buddy if anything would actually be done to address the debt under Trump, the private equity executive said nobody was talking about that. It was a dead issue, and they should take the good news. Paying less in taxes, the friend reminded him, means getting richer. As Stan Collender wrote in 2017, the CEO's public hand-wringing about the national debt was pure subterfuge, a way to forestall the tax increases on their companies that might otherwise have been inevitable. Today, they think they will get actual corporate tax cuts, and as a result, condemning the national debt is no longer necessary. And you can actually track how the media follows suit. This chart shows that as soon as Republicans took control of Congress, news coverage of debts and deficits virtually disappeared from the public conversation. Hey, broke bitch, we're back in 5. The whole thing has been such an obvious con, but it's worked because the journalists who are supposed to be calling it out have instead become willing collaborators. Hey, Meza, convinced that how will you pay for it is a question they came up with on their own, rather than a question that's been fed to them for years by billionaires and defense contractors. Meza. The same billionaires who want to make sure that question is never asked of them. Hey, what? We're back. Look, Meza, I know you've got your wild economic theories, but the American people aren't interested in theories, okay? They're interested in the facts. And the fact is, you're not actually sure that the money we spend on these social programs will pay themselves back in long-term economic growth, are you? Of course not. Nobody can predict every economic spike and shock over the next 20 years, okay? This whole attempt to make sure a bill is perfectly paid for before you pass it is an exercise in absurdity, but you started it. So what happens when your predictions turn out to be wrong? Even if you're only off by a few $100 billion, over time, that's trillions. That adds up. Yeah, what then, big spender? You know what then. You both know what then. Yeah, but we want to hear you say it. Then you raise taxes. There it is. Yahtzee! Have fun in the midterms, Castro. Jesus fucking Christ. Maybe if we taxed the rich like a sane country, you wouldn't be constantly arguing about which essential services to put on the chopping block. But that's the thing, moneybags. You don't have the votes to raise taxes on the rich. Republicans, Manchin, Sinema, they're never going to agree to raise taxes on their donors. So what you're actually doing is writing a check that your ass can't cash. Then why aren't you grilling them? If you actually cared about the debt, you could be running segment after segment asking why politicians would rather protect their rich donors than pay for essential government services. But instead, it's the working class that's asked over and over again to sacrifice on behalf of the budget. It's bullshit. Relax. Why don't you have some champagne and calm down? He can't afford it. Look, Mesa, I'm not grilling them because they're not the ones proposing legislation right now. They aren't proposing a major change to our fiscal or budgetary policy. You are. And if you want to advance a policy choice, you need to be able to answer basic questions about it. Dude, the status quo is a policy choice. The current budget is a policy choice. Choosing to do nothing in the face of a crisis doesn't make you any less of a partisan. Status quo? You people act like if you don't pay for something, it has no cost, but parents unable to afford childcare is a cost. A dying ecosystem is a cost. Millions of people without health insurance is a cost. You just don't think of it that way because you know it's a cost that you will never have to pay. See, now you're appealing to morality. He's being hysterical. And CON is no place for morality. We stick to the facts. Brass tacks. Cold hard data. Big number go up. I'm not here for moralistic speeches. I'm here to ask you the same question over and over again until you give up and die. And if you can't do that without getting emotional, well, maybe that's the reason our country is in the hole it's in. When we come back, a final word from our guests. But first, it wasn't supposed to end like this. No, literally, this video was not supposed to end like this. In the first version of this script, I just focused on the Peterson stuff and explaining why programs like Build Back Better actually reduce the deficit. How the bill basically pays for itself, and how investments end up producing more money in the long term, yada yada yada. But something about it just felt off to me. There's this headline I stumbled on while researching for this video that really messed with my head. Child poverty spiked by 41% after Biden's child tax credit expired. It's a tax credit that Build Back Better was supposed to extend, but it got cut to save money. So in a single month, 4 million kids slipped back into poverty. If you look at how that tax credit was spent when families had it, the numbers are even more grim. The overwhelming majority of it went to food, essential bills, clothing, and school supplies. It's not the only thing we lost either. Universal childcare, paid family leave, free community college, dental and vision benefits from Medicare, all of it got cut in the name of saving money. How much is a hungry kid worth to you? What is the monetary value of clean air and drinking water? What is the economic benefit of making sure that elderly Americans can afford to get their eyes and teeth checked out? Don't get me wrong, there are answers to these questions. I'm sure there are some well-meaning nerds calculating this stuff in terms of dollars and cents as we speak. Hell, I've used some of those nerds' research in this video, but is that how you meant to think about this stuff? This is the power of a good frame. Once you agree to it, you've already lost the debate, already accepted a premise that you probably didn't mean to accept. If a hungry kid asks you for food and you respond, "How will you pay for it?" you are not just asking a question. You are making a moral argument about what that kid means to you, asserting that you are not obligated to take care of them. When a journalist asks, "How will you pay for it?" they too are not just asking about money. They are asserting that things like healthcare, education, a clean environment are not essential. They don't have to get done. They're discretionary. Extra. The kinds of things we can sacrifice if there's not enough left over after all the other dumb shit we spend money on. It's ideology disguised as a neutral question. And if that sounds hyperbolic, and it probably does, just listen to the way they talk about other types of spending. When the military asks for over $500 billion a year, news networks don't worry about budgets. They say,
It's mandatory, of course, Christine, that this pass before the end of the year. This funding is super crucial toward Pentagon funding.
When the useless Department of Homeland Security asks for another $100 billion, Morning Joe doesn't ask if we can afford it. They say,
You've got to get the DHS funding. I don't care what the issues are. Americans are not going to understand a headline, Republicans block funding for Homeland Security.
When politicians launch another $1 trillion intervention into a foreign country, Jake Tapper doesn't ask how we'll pay for it. He asks,
Do you think the White House is doing enough? Is President Obama doing enough? Is the Biden administration doing enough?
This isn't an issue of hypocrisy or a double standard. They're being remarkably consistent. Media elites want a strong military and tough borders. They think they're important. So cost isn't even an issue. We will find a way to pay for it. But programs to protect the poor and working class? Joe Scarborough isn't worried about student debt. Jake Tapper's never gonna go without health insurance. No rich idiot on TV is ever gonna have to worry about if their kids have enough food to eat at night. So to them, these programs are not essential. Now we can talk about budgets. Now it's time for some tough choices.
We're going to have to go after Medicare, Social Security, doing the things that Dave Walker and Pete Peterson and others have been talking about for years. Now, do I want to raise tax rates? No, I don't want to raise tax rates.
Peterson and his ilk are a lot to blame for making how you pay for it so ubiquitous, but his propaganda was only so effective because the media elites he was targeting already kind of agreed with him.
Do you think democracy is part of the problem?
And look, maybe you agree with him too. Maybe you agree that healthcare and housing and education are not as important as spending another $1 trillion on a weapon system that doesn't fucking work. Some people are so used to living off crumbs, they don't even think they're hungry anymore. But if you don't agree, or even if you're not sure if you do, it's worth asking if you really mean to have human rights reduced to questions of dollars and cents, and worth considering how much of your time and energy you want to spend answering a question that is not being asked in good faith. I have watched hours and hours of these how will you pay for it segments, and no matter what the guest says, no matter how thoroughly they answer the question, it never seems to matter.
We're paying for this by changing the tax code and making sure that those making over $400,000 a year are paying their fair share of taxes, along with corporations, which are immensely profitable and are not paying any federal taxes.
How are you? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but do you know how you're paying for it at this point? Because that appears to be one of the sticking points.
I've just given you two examples.
They aren't listening. Because how will you pay for it isn't really a question. It's a game. Played between billionaires and their multimillionaire spokespeople to train you to think of your most basic needs as selfish. A game to get you to think of yourself as a greedy beggar, rather than someone who is being robbed of what is rightly owed to them. A game that you can only really win when you choose to stop playing. Okay, let's end this bitch. Well, folks, it's been a spirited debate about the Democratic spending bill, but I think one thing we've all learned today is that in politics, you can't always get what you want. Partisan activists like to promise you things like free healthcare and free education, but these things aren't actually free. Somebody has to pay for them. Otherwise, that debt will just get passed on to the next generation, to our grandkids. Won't somebody think of his shitty grandkids? That being said, I want to thank both of our guests for coming on the show today and answering some tough questions. And as a sign of good faith, I've decided to give the final word to Mr. Meza. Carlos? You're right. You're right. Money doesn't grow on trees. Every dollar we spend has to come from somewhere else. And that means making some tough choices, right? Right. Holy shit, you finally cracked them. It means being willing to sacrifice. Really sacrifice when budgets are tight. Yeah, exactly. It's starting to sound kind of ominous. You can't just ask for what you want. Somebody has to pay for it. And you know what, Fake? They will pay. Jananda, where did the bazooka go? They'll all pay. Check!
Money, money, money must be funny in the rich man's world. Money, 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 always sunny in the rich man's world. All the things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more videos like this, you can support this channel in one of two ways. I don't do sponsorships on my videos because I don't really use any of those products and I don't know what the fuck a VPN is. And I don't monetize my videos because YouTube is a deeply evil company and I don't want them getting a cut of anything I make. So if you want to support the channel, you can back me on Patreon, which would be super sick, or you could buy some of my dope ass new merch. I worked with a dope artist to come up with 3 designs that I'm really proud of. One of them is this D20 with a rose in it. There's also this sick Sailor Solidarity one, and this Paladin of Hopelessness that I came up with when I was in a deep depression. I'm obsessed with all 3. You can get them on a t-shirt or on a hoodie or on a mug. They're in the store now. Thanks again for watching, and on an unrelated note, I lost a bet to my younger brother recently. So I am now required by law to tell you all that he is better than me at video games. Okay, see you guys later. Bye.